I am Ellen Stellian, the midlife empowerment coach and the founder of the Thrive membership for women 40 and over. And I'm thrilled to introduce you today to Lori B. Duff. Lori B. Duff has been a lawyer since 1994, a judge since 2005, and she's currently the president of the Georgia Council of Municipal Court Judges and is a sought-after speaker for legal conferences. She also regularly speaks at writing conferences about topics where the law and writing intersect. An award-winning legal and humor columnist, she was awarded the title of Atlanta's Funniest Lawyer, which I didn't even think would be a category in the legal world, but fabulous, on a technicality when it was determined that the first place winner wasn't actually a lawyer. So there is a story there that we are going to have to hear. Welcome, Lori. And I want to make sure we talk about all of the fabulous aspects of you before we get into the meat of our conversation about translating legalese into English. And I also want to know about your books, which I asked you to bring today, because I don't know, I'm like, where we're trying to figure out which hat is Lori wearing today. She's a lawyer, she's a judge, she's a humor writer. She's apparently Atlanta's funniest lawyer. So we need to hear about all of it. Tell us about you.
Well, first of all, it's not a hat. It's a tiara.
Yay!
It's an all-purpose tiara. It serves all of those roles. I'm going to take it off because my head's too big for it, actually, and it slides on. Yeah, I do a lot of different things. I have approximately 3 or 4 jobs at any given moment, but that's because I'm bored easily. So I like to keep mixing it up. The Atlanta's Funniest Lawyer thing is not a bar thing. I get an email newsletter from one of the legal papers, and there was an ad in it once that said, "Do you think you're Atlanta's funniest lawyer?" And I thought, well, yes, I do. And so I clicked on it. Granted, it's a very low bar. You don't have to be that funny to be Atlanta's funniest lawyer. So I clicked on the link, and it was a fundraiser for children's health care is what it was. And so there was, I think, 7 or 8 of us that ended up competing, and I came in second, but the guy who came in first was not a lawyer. He was a settlement funding guy. So he worked with
the technicality.
So I said, I'm not accepting we lost to him. He might be funnier than me, but he's not Atlanta's funniest lawyer. I am, and I have proof. So there you go. Actually, if you Google my name and Atlanta's funniest lawyer, you can see my routine.
Wow.
Well, it's on YouTube. You can actually search it on YouTube.
We might have to add that in the comments, Lori, because I think we all want to see that routine.
Okay.
So, yeah. We're going to look for that and add that for sure. So here you are, you're an attorney, are you using humor in your work, or is that like a separate part of your life and that you just decided to embrace?
Some of both. I do try to use humor when I can, because just because we're doing serious things doesn't mean that we have to sound like we're guests at a funeral. Mm-hmm. And I think bad news goes down better if there's some lightness to it, or just difficult topics. Lately, I've been doing a lot of probate work, and when you're discussing, okay, and you are going to die one day, and all your stuff has to go somewhere. So what do you want to happen with it? If you can do that with some humor, I think it makes the conversation a lot easier to have, because people don't like to contemplate their mortality, but they have to, otherwise it's a bigger mess for the people they leave behind. Yeah. Which, if you get nothing else out of what I say today, get that. Please have an estate plan, whoever you are. And please know, a lot of people don't know this, if you get married, if you get divorced, if you have a child, what you had is no longer any good. So you need to redo it.
Oh, okay, right. Changes in personal circumstances, or like legal circumstances in terms of like you're a spouse or you're not, or, in marital status, that kind of thing.
Right. Things that change who your legal heirs are. Things
Uh,
that change who your relatives of first degree are. So, my husband, for example, is a relative of first degree. He's my next of kin. But if we were to get divorced, we wouldn't be family anymore. And so he wouldn't have any inheritance rights.
right.
So that would change. If I were to have another child, then that would change things too, because I'd have another relative of the first degree. Lawyers are the only ones who can tell you without having to think about, oh no, that's your second cousin, third time removed. And the reason why we have to know that is because of probate law, because you have to have relatives of similar degrees for all of that.
Okay, so since I don't know where to go, I want to talk about the humor book and I want to talk about the legalese. You take us where you want to go next.
Okay, well, I have a column that I write every other week I call it Legalese. And I say, it's not actually written down anywhere, but I say that the point of the column is to translate legalese into English, because legalese is a language that looks suspiciously like English because it uses the same words, but they don't always have the same meaning. So a lot of English speakers think that they can read legalese and know what they're reading because they understand all the words. But lawyers are people who can use words like heretofore and whenceforth without a shred of irony. So we're different animals when we write, and words have a very specific meaning. One of those, for example, that comes up a lot is guardian. People think they know what guardian means, and they're mostly right. Guardian is somebody that takes care of somebody else. But in the law, the word guardian has a very specific meaning. So if you have not gone to probate court, and I'm talking about Georgia law because I can't vouch for any of the other 49 states, but if you haven't been to probate court, you're not somebody's guardian. You might be their custodian, you might be their caretaker, you might be any number of other things, but you're not their guardian unless you've gone to probate court and got.
Just for those of us who are not entirely clear, what is probate court?
Okay, yeah, probate court is, and again, it's different in different states, but in Georgia, probate court is where you go to probate a will. It's where you go to do guardianships. If you're going to take control of somebody else's child and you want to be their legal guardian, that's where you would go. It's also in Georgia where you go, and this is kind of funny to me because on the rack, the two papers are right next to each other for the forms to fill out. You get your marriage license and you get your gun permit.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, so I just think it's funny that they're next to each other because
yeah, maybe you need both at the same time. I don't know.
You do here.
Yeah. Clearly.
So yeah. So the guardian agent is another one. People think they know what agent means. But it is in the law, it creates a specific fiduciary relationship with legal obligations. So it's a very technical thing. So lawyers are the only ones who can quibble about just. I once called as an expert in a case a friend of mine who has a PhD in rhetoric to talk about the past tense and how that changed the meaning of what was owed in a contempt hearing.
Wow.
So we can split hairs and do on a pretty regular basis, which is why we're no fun at parties.
Because are you splitting hairs in casual conversations?
Well, sort of, because what I'll do a lot is I want to make sure I'm answering a question when I'm answering a question, which comes up in conversation all the time, I want to make sure I'm answering or responding to the same thing that's being asked. And so I know a lot of other lawyers that do this too. I'll say something like, well, when you say guardian, what do you mean? Have you gone to probate court? And then they feel like they're being cross-examined.
Right, right.
Because they don't actually mean that. They mean their nephew's staying with them for the summer. That's what they mean, you know. But I will make sure all the words are properly defined because I don't want there to be misunderstandings, which is annoying for everyone else. And I know it when I'm doing it, but I can't help myself because I don't want a misunderstanding.
Well, and so we've got Sally with us live, and she's saying she'd love to know a little more about employment contracts. Do they only protect the employer? How enforceable are non-compete clauses? So I don't even know if is that something, is that a legalese thing?
That's not a legalese, that's legal advice, I suppose. But the answer, which is another annoying thing that lawyers always do, is depends. Most times when you ask a lawyer a question, that's the answer. Depends. Depends on what the employment contract says. It depends what state you're in. It depends whether the laws in your location have statutory defaults and whether or not your employment contract has addressed those issues. And so the answer is it depends. I don't like answering specific questions unless I've seen the documentation.
Of course. So the advice to somebody with a question like Sally would be to ask an attorney in Portland, Oregon, where she is, or in the state of Oregon.
Right.
She, to find somebody who is versed in your state's laws and ideally, I guess, in employment law.
Right. And that's another good thing, kind of off topic a little, but that's another good point to make, is that just like you wouldn't go to a gynecologist if you needed brain surgery, you shouldn't go to a divorce lawyer for your employment questions. Yeah. We all have our specialties, our things that we do, things that we know better. It's not as specialized as medicine, but there's a whole list of things that I don't know any more about than you do. And I would be practicing malpractice if I were to take on one of those cases. And unfortunately, that happens a lot. You get a lot of corporate lawyers, and then they have a big client who is getting divorced or who has a traffic ticket, and they go to court with them, and it's inevitably a disaster, even though they're phenomenal lawyers and probably get paid $500,000 a year. They just don't know anything about those particular areas. So
and how do you find a really good lawyer, attorney in the realm where you need it? Like where do you turn to? Is there, do you turn to your friends? Do you turn to other attorneys, or like are there criteria you should look for in finding somebody who is well versed in the law in the particular area of law in your state?
Referrals are always good. If you know someone who's had a similar issue and they've dealt with a lawyer, then they can tell you if they liked what they did or didn't like what they did. If you just are going in cold, you can go to whatever state's bar. In Georgia, it's gabar.org, I think, maybe .com.org. And there's on every website I've ever seen for any state bar, there's always a little button that says something like find a lawyer. And whether it's a referral service or whether it's just the database of lawyers that are registered with the bar, there are sections of the bar. So if you're going through divorce, you might want to find the family law section. If you're dealing with an estate, you would find the probate law section. If you're dealing with employment, you'd find the employment law section. And it will either have a list of all the attorneys in that section, or it will have whoever is in charge of that section and their phone number. You just call them.
Yeah.
I've done that when I have questions in other states.
Okay.
For example, Louisiana, 49 states have their laws based on English law. It's called common law, and it's sort of outgrowth of what went on in English because we were used to be a part of England. Louisiana is different because Louisiana used to be French. It is based on the Napoleonic Code.
Wait,
Which
I know this from your show, Your Honor. It's based in New Orleans.
Yeah, and it's just different.
And it's different. It's like the judge is asking questions. It's like a whole.
Well, just because you saw it on a show doesn't mean anything. But
well, okay, fine, Lori. But I'm just saying, I got a little taste of that because my husband and I were watching and we're like, wait, what? Like, what's happening in this courtroom? It was weird.
Yeah, it is weird. And they use a completely different vocabulary.
Yeah.
So I had a state that I was dealing with once where someone had owned property in New Orleans. They had a rental property in New Orleans. And I couldn't read the deed and I didn't know what I was missing because I know how to do that, but I just couldn't. So I went to the Louisiana State Bar and found the president of the probate section at the Louisiana State Bar and just called her. And I said, hey, I'm a lawyer in Georgia. I have some property here. I don't know what these words mean. Can you help me?
Right. So what's your advice to us in terms of all that legalese and how to make sense of it? I mean, it's not like there may be a dictionary of whatever. I mean, it's really just not assuming that you understand the words that are being spoken and asking questions or getting clarification from an attorney.
Yes. Most attorneys have a very low, relatively low, compared to their hourly rate anyway, consultation fee. So very often, if you're dealing with an important contract, like an employment contract that may affect your life for the next 20 years, it might be worth a couple $100 to just run it by a lawyer. And running it by a lawyer does not mean paying thousands of dollars in retainer fees. You could just have a consultation with somebody and they may look it over because they will see things that you won't. Lawyers are really good. In addition to understanding legalese as a separate language, lawyers are really good doomsday predictors. So what I do when I read a contract, and what I think most lawyers do, is, okay, well, what if it goes wrong? Like I read every sentence. Okay, this is what they're supposed to do, but what if somebody doesn't? Is that addressed? And so that's why something simple like, I will rebuild your deck for you for $5,000 doesn't just say, I will rebuild your deck for you for $5,000. There's a clause dependent on supply chain and what happens if the lumber arrives and it's all warped, and what happens
weather situation,
when, what, and when is the second draw and when is the first draw, and how many days do you have for notification, and where do you notify somebody and how do you notify them? That's why, because especially in form contracts, most things in a contract, most things in a law for that matter, have a story behind them. Yeah. Something wrong. And so that's why they put this in now, because they don't want to deal with that again.
So you're saying every time some issue has come up, now it's like everybody's got to put that issue into the next contract, right? Because now we have something we hadn't anticipated. Now we got to anticipate it, and it's got to cover as much as possible. Right.
I will say there are a lot of things that, you have to sign to just go about life. And if you stop to read all the words, you would never be doing anything but standing there at the cash register reading the 17 pages of the receipt before you sign it. And there's nothing you can do to negotiate it anyway. And what's really going to go wrong? I was once in the Verizon store and getting a new phone, and I actually read what printed out of the thing, and I had questions, and they behind the counter were just looking at me like, nobody's ever read this before. We've never read it. We have no idea.
I download a new app on my computer, and it's like I have to agree to all these terms. Mm-hmm. There's a little checkbox. I'm never reading them.
Right. Nobody ever does. And mostly that's okay until something goes wrong. And then you find out what rights you signed away, because those little check boxes, believe it or not, are enforceable contracts, because you agreed in order to use whatever it is that you're going to abide by these rules. And the rules may be ridiculous, or there may be something you wouldn't impose, but they are what they are. And you check the box, so you did it. Scout's honor, I swear this is coincidental. I finished reading a book today, the premise of which is partially that the devil inserted soul sales clauses into all of those user agreements. And so nobody read it and everybody just clicked, I agree. And so everybody sold their souls to the devil.
Wow. Okay.
The name of the book is We Sold Our Souls. It's by Grady Hendrix, if anyone's interested. It's kind of, I'll call it light horror. I don't know. But anyway, it's but for all we know, that's in there, because nobody in the history of the world has ever actually read all the words.
Right. But I thought there was a movement to, especially for credit card legalese, that there was a movement to simplify and make it clearer, because a lot of people are signing without realizing what interest rates they're agreeing to.
That's true. And that's because that one affects people more often. You know, if I click the end user agreement to play Candy Crush, it's really not going to affect anybody's life. Unless there's a clause in there that says we can buy add-ons for you whenever we feel like it, which
or we can have access to your computer and look at
you can read your emails.
Yeah.
But as far as I know, there's not. But the credit cards really do affect a lot of people in a lot of different ways, because they think, oh, well, I'm only 30 days late, so it'll just be a couple bucks in interest. And what they don't realize is it's 28% interest, and then there's the late fee, and then you get interest the next month, even though you're all paid up, because it was retroactive, and it's just a whole big thing. And then you get these poor $9 an hour people answering the phone who don't understand it either, who are getting yelled at by irate customers. And their little script just says it was in the end user agreement. Nobody can explain it. And it's a disaster. Right. So yeah, that one affects a lot of people in a lot of negative ways. So that's why that one gets so much attention.
And hopefully will be simplified for people. So it's, getting more front and center as to what you're really, at least if you put the major stuff up front, like, making it very clear in English, here's what you're agreeing to. And by the way, if you agree to this interest rate monthly, if you, don't only pay the minimum each month, here's how quickly you could get yourself in a real bind. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I just feel like that stuff is, gets people in trouble.
Yeah, it does. It does. And it would be easy enough to put a little bullet pointed list at the top.
Right.
And we're going to get into more detail later, but here's what you need to know. Bottom line is
that stuff. Yeah. And if you let $200 slide from this month to the next month, here's how quickly it can get to be a problem that you're always, you're trying to get under for years. Mm-hmm. What I'm hearing from you is get educated. Don't take words at their face value. If it's in a legal document, ask questions, get informed, ask questions from attorneys, in that state, in that specialty. And don't assume what a word that you might use colloquially in your regular language, like guardian, that it means the same thing in a legal, that there's a legal translation and then there's a commonplace translation, and those are not the same.
Correct. You got it.
Yes. That allows me to move on to our next topic, because I know we only have a few minutes late, but a few minutes left. But I do want to hear about how you got into humor writing. By the way, I'm also a big fan of the Oxford comma, and I add it everywhere. But I want to hear, tell us about your books, and we're going to need to link to them because they sound hilarious.
Thank you. I will say this, the federal courts have ruled that the Oxford comma is necessary to define meaning. So you have to use the Oxford comma in the court system.
It is a
millions of
law,
dollars.
everybody. It is a law. Start using the Oxford comma.
See, it's not a law. See, that's another legalese word.
Whatever. I'm making it a law.
Precedent. It's binding precedent is what it is.
It's binding precedent, and I'm going to call it a law in the non-legalese term.
Yeah, I told you nobody likes me at parties because this is what I do. Okay, so how I got into humor writing, I can pinpoint the date and time. In 2012, I think, 2012, there was a lot of stuff going on. And I just felt like I needed to take control over something in my life that I could control. And I think all of us at some point have felt this way.
Yes.
So I decided the one little area that I could control was the cleanliness of my bathroom. So I went into the bathroom and I scrubbed it top to bottom. I'm talking grout with a toothbrush, everything shining. You could have licked the toilet bowl. It was clean and shiny. So my husband, who is the poster child for adult attention deficit disorder, decides that such a clean, shiny bathroom deserves new light bulbs to show it off. So we have a double sink. Right. I mean, his heart was in the right place. When I get to the next part, understand that I recognize that his heart was in the right place.
I'm feeling that this was the high that he's coming from, and we're something's happening here.
Yeah. So he goes, we have a double sink, and so we have separate fixtures over each sink. So over my sink, he goes to unscrew the light bulb, and the little sockets that the light bulb goes in, he decides are a little too loose for his tastes.
Okay.
So rather than just go, oh, well, like a normal human, he takes down the light fixture in order to fix it. At which point, dust and debris get all over my nice clean bathroom. Furthermore, he didn't put it back up for 9 months. So, and this was, a while ago, so blogging wasn't quite what it is now, but I started blogging, and it was really just a private thing, more like an online diary, about all the things he chose to do that were, in his estimation, apparently more important than putting up the light over my sink. And I called it the light over my sink. And it included things like researching what kind of grass to plant underneath the power line easement in our backyard in order to attract wild turkeys.
Wow. It's very specific.
Right. And very, very important.
Yes, clearly.
Important. And I also need to point out that he is now and was then retired. So it's not like he had anything else to do all day. So I started blogging about this, and I shared it with just a few friends, and they loved it. And then not long after that, this is when the patch was big. The editor of the local patch put out a call for blogs. She wanted local bloggers. And so I sent her a link to the light over my sink, and I said, is this what you're looking for? And she said, this is exactly what I'm looking for. And I thought, well, this is a little personal. I don't want to go in public and just dog my husband every week. So I've limited it to dogging him like once every 2 months.
All right, that's reasonable.
But it's not just constant.
Right.
So I kind of made it a little less personal and just started blogging about it. And then that's a nice natural segue into my books, because I started getting sad that my blogs had no home of their own, which is it's a good thing that I did this, because the patch site that I was on is no longer, so you can't find those online. But I collected them into my first book, which I call Mismatched Shoes and Upside Down Pizza.
Hey, yeah.
And then I just kept doing it, and I kept getting more and more. So then we have the armadillo, the pickaxe, and the laundry basket, which is named for the time that we had a house on Lake Oconee, and an armadillo tunneled its way into my bedroom.
Oh.
And so it took a pickaxe and a laundry basket, also a catfish net, but that didn't really fit in the title. Get it out of my house. And then there's, I love you because you're still alive. Just a general sentiment of mine. And then finally, we have if you did what I asked in the first place.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Then I wouldn't have the book. Right. So it's been a few years since that one came out. And in the last book, my kids are like 12 and 13, and now they're 18 and 20. So that'll tell you how long it's been. But I've been working on other projects rather than putting another book together, which I probably should do. But
I don't know. Sounds like it might be time. How's your family responded to your public storytelling?
My kids have never really known life without me doing that.
Okay.
So they're used to it.
Yeah.
My daughter was 8 and my son was 10 when I started, and they're just kind of used to it. My son likes it. He's always been the kind of kid where it's like he doesn't care if it's negative or positive attention. It's just all attention. So anything that puts his name in the paper, he's happy with. My daughter thinks that I write her in such a way that she comes off as a brat. And she's not at all. She's a great kid. So she's a little more conscious of it and not thrilled when I write about her, but that doesn't stop me. I really don't write anything. I don't write anything personal. It's all just silly. My husband will tell you that I lie, that I exaggerate.
Of course.
Right. At which point I will ask him, okay, well, I need you to point to me to the sentence that is a lie.
This is where the lawyer comes in.
Right. Another reason why we're no fun at parties, because we cross-examine people.
Right.
Like they prove it. So he hasn't yet to do that.
Right. Yes. He's just, he can't take it apart. And I could imagine, and I don't know if you write about friends and other stuff, but I can imagine either being a person in your family or a friend who'd be like, we do something funny, like, oh my God, don't write about that. Or, oh my God, you have to write about that, or whatever.
My friends are the kind of people who say, you have to write about this.
Yeah.
They all recognize a good story. And I've become so, that's just my reputation of writing about anything interesting that happens that, and I think it's in the second book, The Armadillo, the Pickaxe and the Laundry Basket. Several years ago, I shattered my wrist playing pickleball, which I don't know if you're familiar with, but
I am
pickleball is a sport that is designed for people with limited mobility. And I am so ungraceful and so non-athletic that playing that sport, I managed to shatter my wrist such that it needed surgical reconstruction.
Wow.
And it was just, of course, it was also on Christmas Eve, because why not? And it was a disaster. But where was I going with that? Oh, even while it was happening, while I'm sobbing because it hurts so much and they're trying to reset the bones just to keep them in place before I can get into surgery, people are texting me, well, I guess you get a good blog post out of it.
That's how you get your stories. I mean, where do we think Seinfeld gets his, got his stories? It's like you see something or you read something or you experience something, and then it's like, okay, I got to make it. I got to write about this.
It's also a good coping mechanism for things that go wrong, because if I'm so hyper aware of it now because I've been doing it for so many years. The things that I've been just thinking about all my life, I've already written about. So I need to come up with new stuff.
Yeah.
Is that I'm constantly on the lookout. Can this be? Can this be? And so when something does happen, I always think, okay, how can I make this funny? Which is a good way, which brings our conversation full circle, because I started out talking about people's wills and doing this.
Yes.
If you can make a difficult thing humorous, it takes a lot of the sting out of it.
I agree. There's a really wonderful place for humor, for lightheartedness, because there's there's just a lot of hardship in the world and a lot of challenge right now. I mean, in general, but certainly these times of trying. So I appreciate that. But it is a skill to be able to write about humor and to be able to pick out the humor in life and shine a light on it. So I think that's fabulous what you're doing. And and Sally just commented, I guess she's been on your website and loves that you're a proponent of 2 spaces after a period rule, and she thanks you. Although I am not, so I'm not thanking you, but I'm going to stick to the one space.
I can tell you why too. First of all, it's muscle memory.
Of course.
I type 100 words a minute, and if you think I'm going to slow down to think at the end of every sentence, you're incorrect. And I've just been doing tap tap so long that I can't not do it. Second of all, I am a big proponent of white space on the page.
That is nice.
Like when words are all crowded together, it looks like ants crawling on the page, and I find it difficult to read. I don't see any reason why we can't just have a little more space, a little breathing room between sentences.
Well, on that note, we disagree on the double spacing, but we agree on the Oxford comma.
That's the important one.
There was exactly. This was a wide-ranging conversation. You're like a Renaissance woman, and you've got so many different aspects to you. And I think it's so much fun to talk to somebody who's talented in so many right brain, left brain ways. I mean, it's like you're like the perfect melding of creative and cerebral at once. So I appreciate you talking to us and teaching us some things. And I would love for you to go on to the Facebook Live and add your website, your book links, what was that? Was it a video? I can't remember. We talked about earlier.
Yeah, the Atlanta's Funniest Lawyer.
Yes, we need that too, so everybody can read all about that. So please do that for us, and then that'll be just fun for everybody in the replay to be able to access all of that. And I just so appreciate you coming on today. And I want to thank Sally and everybody else for watching. And don't forget to check out the links. And if you enjoy these videos, watch for more in the coming weeks. Until then, be well and stay safe, everybody, and have a laugh or two while you're at it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yay.